It's not that obsession that kills you. It's what you obsess over. Because obsession over control, validation, approval, success, that's what makes you sick. But obsessive obedience to the voice of God, that makes you free. Hey guys, welcome back to the Own It Show. I'm your host, Justin Roethlingshoefer. And if it's your first time here, first off, I'm so grateful that you have invested in yourself enough to listen to this podcast. Every single time we put out a show, it's something that I want you to grow from. It's something that I want to speak to you, not just speak to you so that you can understand it from a mental side of things, but really understand it from a heart side of things. Because again, when we think about habits, I think habits are oftentimes seen as like the end-all be-all. But we can't have full transformation just through habits. We have to have full transformation through a heart transformation first. And that's really what we talk about here, is how do we intersect faith and science? How do we intersect the truth with the data? And when we're able to really come back to this, it's able to open up some new doors. And today, we're really going to talk about what does it look like to be obsessive. I think you see on social media today where everybody has a voice. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to get their opinions out. It's, you can't be successful unless you're obsessive. Nothing great ever comes from somebody who is passive. You can't get anywhere you want to be unless you're obsessed about the win, the result, the outcome. And as I was running on a treadmill this morning, I was listening to the most recent podcast, Diary of a CEO podcast with Stephen Bartlett, and he was interviewing Jimmy Fallon. And Jimmy said something, I'm going to get into that story here in a second, that really set the mode for this podcast. So this was something that, again, it's how my brain works, is I'll hear something, it'll move in my spirit, I'll step in obediently, I'll research it, I'll see where it aligns scientifically, and then be able to storytell off it so that we can have a real life encounter that hopefully creates some new evidence in our life of a transformation or a transformative process that we're about to go through that's going to glean fruit in the long run based upon our health and how we can step up as a leader, as a father, as a wife, as a husband, as a mother, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, whatever that looks like for you. And so today we are talking about healing high performance and health through the lens of obsession. And when we think about this, obsession is not just any obsession, it's the obsession that sickens you. And not because you care too much, but more because you care about your will rather than God's calling on you. I want to take you back to where this really came a part of my story. And so you've heard my story a number of times before. If you haven't, again, encourage you to go back. We've got over 250 episodes on this podcast, 330, I think, total between when all the episodes have kind of come together. And again, if something today speaks to you, or if it's something that resonates with you, all I ask is that you would share this, comment on it, subscribe to it, so that, again, we can just reach more people. But I want to take you back through my story, because my story, again, I was 12 years old in Edmonton, back in Canada, and I was obsessed about health. I wanted to know everything there was about health. I wanted to understand how we could heal people, what data was all about. I wanted to know more about this body. And the more that I leaned into that obsession, the further down the road I got. I'd wear a heart rate monitor to go to bed. I would have 4 or 5 wearable devices on my body at one time through college. I was wearing brainwave sensors. I was memorized the glycemic index from the top down. It was always trying to figure out what was going on within my body. What was this thing that was actually happening? And for me at the time, I was utilizing all of this information, all of this data, all of these knowings as a way in which I was going to get to the NHL. That was going to be my path. That was going to be my ticket. I was going to be the hardest worker. I was going to be the person who just was able to get the marginal gains because I was obsessed about it and other people weren't. And it was concept of playing into something that my worth was solely dependent on my outcome. And while I thought I was chasing greatness, looking back on it and retrospectively, really what I was chasing was wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard, wanting to be understood. I wanted to try to prove something to the world, to myself, sometimes even to God, to be honest with you. And when I really stepped back, underneath all the training, underneath all the disciplines, underneath the obsession was fear. Fear that if I stopped, and even for a moment, I'd lose everything that I thought defined me. And I would step into a place that was not valuable. I'd step into a place that wasn't worthy. And the fact of the matter is over the course of 20 years of diving in, doing all of these data components, learning about my body, coming down to the States, going through my schooling, my 2 undergraduate degrees, my master's degree, my postgraduate research, all of the things that I stepped into, I ended up making it to the NHL. Not as a player as what I had thought, but as a performance coach. But in that process, I also lost my health. I lost my peace. I lost my joy. I lost my ability to rest. Because when obsession owns you, obedience can't. And that was something that just really came off. You guys know my story. Ultimately ended up having 4 precancerous polyps in my colon and a precancerous ulcer in my stomach. I was told I wouldn't see 35. And if I was to be really honest with myself over the course of time, what I put my body through, the stress that I was constantly under, the striving that I was constantly doing, the late nights, the early mornings, the obsessive disciplines, the things that everybody else around me validated me for, was really the predicator of the loss of my health. And that story came up for me after I was listening to Jimmy Fallon this morning, because Jimmy Fallon was talking about his story, where at 12 years old, he wrote himself a letter, and he said before the age of 25, I will be on SNL. And as he was sitting on this podcast with Stephen Bartlett, Stephen asked him, what would have happened if you didn't make it by 25? He's like, oh, that was just an option. That just wasn't an option. That just wasn't even going to be an opportunity. Like that, I wouldn't let that happen. And he continued to keep questioning him. And obviously we know Jimmy Fallon today, host of The Tonight Show, who spent years on SNL, ultimately taking over multiple different late night shows to now be on The Tonight Show. But when they went back and they said, okay, Jimmy, like, what was your mental state like? How did you feel during all of this? And I think this is the first time I've ever, and this is what moved me, it was the first time I've ever seen Jimmy Fallon not goofy, not laughing, not joking, not making a comedic reference to every single thing that came about. But he said, I actually wrote a letter to myself, and I said, if I didn't make it onto SNL by the age of 25, that I was going to kill myself. And there was a time where this striving, this pushing, this component of continuing to reach and be obsessive about this, moving to LA and making his different tables and chairs and side tables in his small room of an apartment her small room that he called an apartment, out of cardboard, because that's all that he had. And he wrote another letter to his best friend at the time, and he said, bro, I'm spiraling. Mentally, I'm not okay. I feel all of my health literally being drained out of my body. And it came from the obsessing, the overdoing, the overthinking, the constant overreaching. And there was a point in which he was at his breaking point. And when you think about this, I want you to think about this not in terms of my story, not in terms of Jimmy's story, but what is it in terms of your story? What are you obsessing about? What are you obsessively reaching and striving for? Because that's what the world told you have to do. That's what the world told you is necessary in order to succeed. I see all the time on social media all these gurus saying, you have to obsess. Obsession is what creates greatness. Obsession is what creates breakthrough. Obsession is what creates great things. And by the law of inevitability, which I've talked about a lot, where anything done consistently and intentionally over the course of time will create an inevitable outcome. It's inevitable that if you obsess over something, it will come true. The downside is oftentimes what you're obsessing about is not necessarily what it is that you're actually looking for. And hear me out on this, because as soon as I got to the NHL, I would call it my ultimate failure. It's where I found success without fulfillment. It's when I got there, it's not what I actually thought it was. Because what I was obsessing about was actually not what I was supposed to be doing. It was not what I was actually called to do. It's what I wanted. And so I want to get real scientific for a moment, because obsession isn't just mental, it's physiological. And when we think about this, heart rate variability is the measure, it's a body's language of how our body is adapting to stress and strain. Mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, real, perceived, positive, negative, stress. The body does not know the difference. All it knows is that there is something going on internally, something that is happening that your body has to protect itself against. And thus, what happens is you end up in a constant sympathetic overdrive. Basically meaning that your body's always on, it's always pushing, it's never relaxing, it's never in a safe space. And so your heart rate variability tanks, it drops, it plummets, which is the language to say, hey, my body is not adapting well to the stressors and the strains, the rhythms that you're exposing it to. And heart rate variability is one of the greatest indicators of recovery, adaptability, and ultimately nervous system health. When we think about nervous system health, nervous system is what keeps your body alive. It's your spinal cord and your brain. And so a lot of research has started to show that we need, like, the nervous system is literally the core functioning area of longevity. We need to optimize for nervous system health. But because we've never really talked about it, because we've never really looked into this, everything starts with the nervous system. And because we've never really talked about it, we completely overlook it. And we just think, oh, health is, what's my body composition? What's my weight? What's my blood pressure? What's all of these things? These are all outcomes. These are all results of long-term nervous system health. And so a low heart rate variability means high stress, poor recovery, and increased risk of chronic disease. I talk about it a lot in my talks where, on different keynotes and workshops I do, that if we look at chronological versus biological age, chronological, how old are you? How many years have you been on this earth? Biological age, how old are you cellularly? Heart rate variability is an amazing predictor or estimator of biological age, and taking a look at, okay, how old are you cellularly? What are you doing from a habit, behavior, and lifestyle standpoint that's impacting you long term on how you're feeling, operating, and ultimately able to continue to keep going? Now, when we think about this, there's two studies that came out, one in 2021, the other in 2023. And looking at the impact and influence of heart rate variability on cortisol and inflammation within the body. And chronic obsession triggers an ongoing stress response. So if it triggers an ongoing stress response, that means by default, heart rate variability has to drop. If heart rate variability has to drop, that means your body is staying in fight or flight and stays activated. Because your body is in a fight or flight state, the only reaction that your body has is to produce adrenaline, norepinephrine, and ultimately cortisol, which leads to inflammation, immune dysfunction, and hormonal imbalance, eventually leading to burnout and breakdown. And I'm sure you've experienced this in your life before, where you've been going so hard, you've been pushing so hard, you've been doing what you're supposed to be doing, but you just feel burnt out and broken down. And that burnout and breakdown just starts to, like, it happens suddenly after happening slowly. The other thing that happens is we see this cognitive decline. There was a 2017 study that showed obsessive compulsive tendencies being heavily linked to anxiety, insomnia, and even memory loss. And when I go back to my teenage years, I've talked about this a lot as well, and I've had this heavy OCD component where I would do nothing but lean into, I had this heavy OCD component, and I would run up and down the stairs 4 times before I could actually stop going up the stairs. I would do 10 push-ups after I walked through every doorway. I'd have to do 10 squats before I pulled my books out of my bag. I was constantly obsessing over the data and having to have it perfect and being able to match all of this. And I still literally remember the more obsessive that I got, the deeper down this space that I got, the further that I strived towards thinking that this was my worth and this was like this knowledge, wisdom I was gaining was going to be my edge and the marginal gain that I would get an advantage over anybody else. And lo and behold, the anxiety came up. The inability to stay asleep came up. The overwhelm started to come about. The depression started to hit. And what ends up happening is your brain literally rewires itself around the object of your obsession until you can't think about anything else. It's literally the forefront of everything, which is why people who are on mission, who are constantly striving, it's something that they constantly seek. It's like you're constantly checking your emails to see if something happened within the business. You're constantly checking your bank balance. You're constantly checking to see if you've how that team member's doing. Did you close that deal? Where are they at? Like, you can't be present doing anything else. You can't be present with your family. You can't be present with your workouts. You can't be present while you're trying to get to sleep. You can't do anything. It literally becomes the all-encompassing. But here's the catch. It's not that obsession that kills you. It's what you obsess over. Because obsession over control, validation, approval, success, that's what makes you sick. But obsessive obedience to the voice of God, that makes you free. When you obsess over control, validation, approval, and success, that's what makes you sick. It's only when you take that same obsession and you bring it to obedience, to the space that you're meant to be, to the where you're supposed to go, to what God is calling you to, that's what sets you free. Because I look at this and I look at where I am now versus where I was through the NHL, and I'm more busy now. I have more going on now. I have higher stress levels now. Should have higher stress levels now. Let me correct that. But man, I feel more on fire. I feel more alive. I feel more convicted. I feel more content than I ever did after signing contracts, working with teams, all of these things. Because I want to come to the word for a second, because this, again, I love integrating the science with the studies. And you've heard me say this all the time. This is literally my life verse, is Romans 12:1 and 2. Offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And here's what hit me, is that obsession is confirmation. We're basically conforming when we obsess, because everybody says you need to obsess in order to win. You need to obsess in order to get where you want to go. You need to obsess, and thus obsess over your skill set, obsess over your business, obsess over the data, obsess over the thing. But obedience is transformation. Obedience is transformation. And thus, we weren't called to strive our way into calling. All God said was, follow me. Follow me. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow me, follow me. And so there's a massive difference between striving for approval and serving out of surrender. Because obsession says, I'll force the outcome. I'll pry open the door. I'll do everything I have to do in order to make this happen. But obedience says, I'll follow the way. I'll go to the door that opens. I'm going to be purposefully patient. I'm going to be a master of my craft for what I've been called for. And so when I go back to this story, there was a point where my HRV was in the 30s. I couldn't sleep for more than 4 hours. I was always sore. I was always stressed. My digestion was wrecked. I'd eat anything. It got to a point where I would eat a smoothie or soup or anything, even liquid, and I would bloat like a whale. I'd gone to every doctor, tried tens of thousands of dollars worth of supplements. I'd gone through every product, every protocol, every biohacking tool. Again, you can imagine, I was in the NHL. I had access to every doctor. But when I actually look back on it, man, I was so unsatisfied. I was so unhappy. I was so unfulfilled. Even though I was where I was trying to get, I felt like I had arrived and nobody was there. Something massively missing. And if I really dive even deeper into it, like my spirit was tired. My soul was loud with pressure and silent in peace. Just like, even go back to that moment. Like those years were exhausting, and I could literally feel my health being stripped away from me. And it wasn't until I repented for idolizing my own vision that the start of real health began. And it was a sacrifice of the path I was on. And then being obsessively obedient as to what to do next. And so I want to ask you a few questions. As I ask these, I want you to just reflect. When was the last time that you truly rested without guilt? Like truly rested. And I'm not talking about a vacation. I'm talking about being able to come home, put the books away, and be present with the family. I'm talking about during a Sabbath where you're able just to wake up with no agenda and let yourself just be. And all of a sudden, see seamless and optimally flowing creativity start come out. When was the last time you truly rested without guilt? The second, are you more focused on the outcomes than you are the obedience? Meaning, do you have in your mind the exact thing that you want to do, that you're going for, that you've set forth, and you're not going to rest, you're not going to stop, you're not going to relent until you get there? But is the outcome what you've been asked to carry? And then, is your body whispering symptoms that you're trying to out-discipline? Or is your body whispering symptoms that you're trying to justify? Or is your body whispering symptoms that you're saying validates your hard work? Is your body whispering symptoms that it's saying, hey, this isn't right? And then lastly, do you control your schedule, or does your schedule control you? Because your body is a temple, but temples need rhythm, not just fire. I love this picture, and this analogy is you walk into a house and they've got this fire in the fireplace, and it's snowing outside, and the temperature is beautiful when you walk in. It's all set up for Christmas. There's this energy, there's this flow, there's this power. But then all of a sudden, you walk in to the same house in the summer, and it's green, everything's outside, or it's green outside, everything's like flourishing, it's humid, it's hot, and you've got this fire on the inside, and it's all decorated for Christmas. It's just out of place. It doesn't feel right. It's like what's actually going on here? It's like your body. You need a rhythm. You need seasons. You need moments. Because if you just have constant fire, the fire is going to burn out. Because God never asked us to grind for His glory. He asked us simply to abide. He asked us to be obedient. He asked us to follow Him. And how good is He that He gave our bodies a language through heart rate variability, to give us a sign and say, hey, you're out of rhythm. This isn't working. It's time to start doing something different in order to step into my calling long term. Because what you want can happen short term. But my gosh, I'm not here to play the short-term game. I don't know about you, but I'm here to play the long game. Long game of impact, long game of influence, long game of legacy. That's what I'm here for. Because I hope today is like a wake-up call in some way. Don't get me wrong, I don't want you to stop caring. I don't want you to stop pursuing. I don't want you to stop doing. I don't want you to stop working. Come back. The harvest is abundant. The harvest is plenty, but the hands are few. We have to work. We have to do. We have to pick up the sword, grab the armor, and go do the work. But we need to start caring differently. We need to start living differently. Let your obsession shift from proving to ultimately obeying. From outcomes to obedient action. Because that's where obsession wins. Because if you're obsessively obedient and the ask is to rest, I'm going to rest. If you're obsessively obedient and the ask is to change directions, I'm going to change directions. If you're obsessively obedient and the ask is to go faster, I'm going to go faster. But if you're obsessively obedient, you're also going to find the seasons and the rhythms that work for you, because you're not going to be asked to do something or step into something that you can't carry. And so I want you to come back to those questions. I want you to come back and ask, when's the last time you truly rested without guilt? Are you more focused on the outcome than you are obedience? And is your body whispering symptoms that you're trying to out-discipline or validate or ultimately justify to prove that you're good enough? And then lastly, does your schedule run you, or do you run your schedule? Because again, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish, it's seen so many times. You can take it from my story, you can take it from Jimmy Fallon's story, you can take it from anybody's story that likely is around you. And they're going to talk about how this obsessive component was ultimately something that stole something from them, which is their health. And some stories end in like, hey, yeah, it took me out and it ended me. It ended the call. It cut it short. It aborted the mission. But others are going to, no, I had a wake-up call, and this is where I started to live different. This is where I started to step into things different. This is where I started to have success in a different way. And so it's not that obsession is bad. It's obsessing over the wrong thing. Don't obsess over outcomes. Obsess over obedience. And the cool part is when you obsess over obedience, you can't make a wrong decision. You're always going to be in the right. You're always going to find your rhythm. You're always going to be in that place. As long as you're taking your obedience from the Father and not from the world. So we know success is different. So own your different. I will see you guys next week.